Janis Joplin wowed audiences with her booming voice and electric stage presence, but in the last year of her life, exhaustion from touring and failed attempts at sobriety marked a tragic final chapter for the rock icon. In August of 1969, Janis Joplin was riding high after her standout performance at Woodstock. Even though she was quite drunk during her early morning set, she gave a brilliant performance that won her even more fans. She continued doing shows regularly in the months after the iconic festival, and her fans flocked to see her.
Do you have any explanation why you're so popular?
She probably didn't expect that almost exactly 3 months after Woodstock, she would be leaving a gig in handcuffs. On November 16, 1969, Joplin was playing a concert in Tampa, Florida for 3,500 people. At one point, attendees began dancing in the aisles and on their chairs. The police who were doing security for the venue began pushing the crowd back and told Joplin to instruct her fans to get back in their seats. However, she refused, telling the police, "Don't f*** with those people." This was followed by more profanity. After the show, Joplin was arrested for using vulgar and indecent language. She spent about an hour at the police station being booked, then left in a fur coat like the rock star she was. The charges were eventually dropped by a judge who determined that Joplin's use of profanity was free speech. Joplin was no fan of the Rolling Stones, at least according to her friend Mark Farner of Grand Funk Railroad. He told the podcast Rock History Music, "She'd say British invasion my ass. Those guys sing in American English because we are the only ones free. Those guys are born subject to the crown. Those guys are born." But it seems Joplin took her dislike a bit further than just talking trash behind the Brits' backs. Farner told the pod, "We spoke of this and she was smearing chocolate all over the seats of a helicopter that the Rolling Stones were going to use next." Joplin may have thought Mick Jagger was fake for singing in an American accent, but that didn't stop her from attending the Rolling Stones concert at Madison Square Garden on November 27, 1969. The band's opening act was Ike and Tina Turner. Joplin, who as usual had a few drinks in her, decided to jump on stage right at the end of their set to sing and dance with Turner. Despite Joplin's performance being off-key and only lasting for a few seconds, the audience loved it. Her appearance was also notable enough to be featured in much of the concert's media coverage. The Stones, on the other hand, were not happy and made it clear to Joplin that it had better never happen again. Some claim there was a philosophy Janis Joplin lived by, which was to get stoned, stay happy, and have a good time. However, in a 1969 letter to her friend Linda Graventees, Joplin made it clear that this was only half of the complete thought. According to the book, Janis, Her Life in Music, the singer reflected about how to battle depression, or what she called the cosmic blues. She explained that one approach was to get stoned and have a good time, while the other was just to try and adjust to it. The year before she died, Joplin was ready to try the second option. In August of 1969, Joplin was exhausted from 2 years of constant touring and purchased a home in a wooded suburban area outside of San Francisco. She spent the next year trying to make it a home. While modest by today's rock star standards, Joplin added her own touches, including painting the walls purple, installing a huge doggy door for her St. Bernard, and bringing in a pool table. She sat on the back porch cooking on the built-in barbecue and looking out on redwood trees and a stream. She hoped that the location's beauty, quiet, and calm would help her stay off drugs. Joplin even tried to convince Graventees to move in with her, writing in a letter, "The excitement of having a house and the incredible peace you feel there ought to be wonderful. We could really be happy there." Joplin had been using drugs since long before she was famous. She also drank heavily, but it was her use of heroin that really concerned those around her. Despite telling Graventees that her new home would help her stay clean, when Graventees moved in during November 1969, she realized Joplin was still using. An intervention followed, and Joplin saw a specialist for help in December, but it was clear that she wasn't ready to give it up just yet. Just 10 days after seeking treatment, she accepted heroin offered to her backstage at one of her concerts. Even so, Joplin knew her drinking and drug habit was getting out of hand. What finally allowed her to give up heroin for 4 to 5 months during her final year was a trip she took to Brazil in February 1970. Joplin ended up staying longer than she anticipated and hitchhiking around the country. Somehow, this was the rehab she needed, and it worked. She came back to the United States clean and stayed that way for several months. People who attended a Janis Joplin concert often describe the experience as subtly or even overtly sexual. On stage, Joplin came alive in a way that was sensual and intimate. Once the performance was over, however, she was a woman insecure about her looks who wanted to get married and have kids one day. However, she still embraced the free love vibe of the hippie movement. She was rumored to have been intimate with Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix, but in her final years, she had several other flings and relationships. Some of the most famous men included football star Joe Namath and musician Chris Christopherson, but she also dated regular guys. She met fellow American David Nihas on a beach in Brazil in February 1970. He had no idea who she was, an increasingly rare experience for her, and they began a relationship. She even got engaged to a young college dropout named Seth Morgan the month before she died.
No, I like to be around men.
One major question about Joplin is how to define her sexuality. In 1973, her friend Peggy Caserta published a memoir, Going Down with Janis, in which she claimed to have been Joplin's lover up until her death. However, in her later years, Caserta explained she didn't actually write the book and blamed the ghostwriter for adding the stuff about their relationship. Caserta said she only went along with it because she needed money for drugs. Regardless of what Joplin and Caserta's relationship really was, Caserta believed Joplin was bisexual. The raucous version of Joplin who performed on stage drunk was not her natural personality, but a persona she adopted for her career. The dichotomy between her real self and who she became on stage was something that messed with her brain. Joplin once told rock writer David Dalton, "I used to wonder, especially when people would clap and tell me I was good, I used to wonder, is it really me or am I putting on a show?" As she became famous and Janis Joplin became synonymous with that image, she tried to break from that persona in her private life by asking people to call her Pearl. There is a bit of a disagreement from sources and acquaintances about how and when this happened. It may have started in the last year of her life. Journalist Al Aronowitz once wrote that the last thing she ever said to him was to call her Pearl instead of Janis. According to Aronowitz, the singer told them this at a concert on August 6, 1970. Others say the nickname came much earlier, during her years in San Francisco in the mid-1960s. Even more confusingly, Joplin biographer Myra Freeman wrote that it was actually Pearl who was the over-the-top onstage persona, while Janis was the real person offstage, although Joplin's own comments seem to refute this. Janis Joplin's only #1 hit was Me and Bobby McGee, released after her death. It was a cover of a Chris Christopherson song, and when Joplin met him in early 1970, they formed an immediate connection. With some other friends, the couple embarked on a 3-week drinking session that became known as the Great Tequila Boogie. Joplin was off heroin at the time, but the group was perpetually drunk. According to Far Out, Christopherson said, "I dug her, but I had itchy feet. I'd get up intending to get out, and in she comes with the early morning drinks. And pretty soon you're wasted enough and you don't care about leaving." The drinking spree ended with an infamous tattoo party. Joplin had recently gotten inked on her wrist at a tattoo parlor in San Francisco. She liked her new decoration so much that she had the artist come out to her house and tattoo her friends and bandmates. Joplin got a second tattoo at the party, a small heart on her chest. She would later tell Dick Cavett on his show that the one on her wrist was for everyone, and the heart was just for her friends. It was only some imminent tour dates that brought the Great Tequila Boogie to an end. After playing a show at Madison Square Garden on December 19, 1969, Joplin took a break from performing. For 3 months, she did little else but spend time with Linda Graventies at their home outside of San Francisco trying to find peace. Before a rock star at the peak of her fame, she couldn't be away from her fans any longer. In early 1970, Joplin went back on the road with a new backing band, the Full Tilt Boogie Band. Among the various gigs and surprise performances she undertook, Joplin also joined the Grateful Dead on their Festival Express tour across Canada, headlining with other huge acts including the band.
I don't know where you've been all week, but we've been at a party.
Joplin seemed to have a wonderful time. According to at least one person involved, the musicians on the tour were able to enjoy the performances more than they usually could at other concerts and festivals, where the focus was typically on the fans. In Toronto, Joplin told the crowd, "Man, I never expected this of Toronto. You're really looking beautiful, man." Audiences loved Joplin just as much in Canada as in the United States. One reviewer wrote about the steep $16 price of admission to one of the shows, saying, "It was worth that much and more to see and hear Janis Joplin sing with the insistence and power of a pile driver and generate enough personal electricity to light up the stadium all by herself." On August 3, 1970, Joplin gave what would be her final TV interview on The Dick Cavett Show. Cavett seemed to genuinely enjoy chatting with Joplin, whom he called his little songbird. Their freewheeling conversation covered everything from her songwriting process to her recent trip to Brazil, and that barely scratches the surface of the topics the pair managed to discuss. Joplin also performed the song Move Over. Cavett remembered Joplin fondly decades later. He attended the premiere of the documentary Janis Little Girl Blue in 2015, where he regaled other guests with stories about his late friend. One of the most notable performances Joplin gave during her final year of her life was at the Festival for Peace. Organized by Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary, it fell on the 25th anniversary of the U.S. dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The lineup was one for the ages. Over the course of 12 hours, the festival-goers enjoyed performances from the likes of Steppenwolf, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Dionne Warwick, and many more. Held at Shea Stadium on August 6th, Janis Joplin was a last-minute addition to the lineup, joining her former band Big Brother and the Holding Company on stage to close the festival. 3 days before, Joplin had announced she would be there during her final interview on The Dick Cavett Show. But 3 days was not enough time to make up for the inadequate publicity the event had generated before then. Despite hoping for a crowd of 50,000 people, only an estimated 15,000 tickets were sold. The proceeds went to anti-war organizations. Regardless of the disappointing crowd size, Joplin put on an electric show, including a duet with Dionne Warwick. The Village Voice wrote in its review of the concert, Joplin's performance was a dynamite surprise appearance that started such rhythmic foot stamping from the crowd that the stands were vibrating a full 5 or 6 inches with every beat.
Playing is the mostest fun there is. Feeling things and really getting into it.
Karate.
That's fun.
Joplin was aware that she owed her sound to black blues singers who came before her. She was open about her influences and credited their greatness, so it was fitting that she went some way to paying back one of her biggest influences in an unexpected way. She bought a headstone for Bessie Smith. Smith was an overnight sensation in 1923 when she recorded her first record. By the end of the 1920s, she had made more money than any other black entertainer in history, but due to changing tastes, her star faded in the 1930s. Tragically, she had finally begun a career comeback when on September 26, 1937, she was involved in a horrific accident with a truck. Badly injured, including losing her arm, Smith died at the hospital. Her exact age is unknown, but she was probably in her early 40s. While 7,000 people attended her funeral near Philadelphia, her family didn't have enough money to afford a headstone. The blues singer's grave remained unmarked for decades, until a letter to the Philadelphia Inquirer asking about it caught the public's attention. On August 7, 1970, a stone purchased by Joplin and NAACP leader Juanita Green was unveiled in Mount Lawn Cemetery. On August 12, 1970, Joplin gave what would be her last public performance in Boston at Harvard Stadium. An estimated 40,000 people showed up to see her, and then were forced to wait for hours for the show to start. It seemed that some of the sound equipment had been stolen, and when new amps finally arrived, the techs had to set everything up again. 2 opening acts were only just enough to keep the fans from rioting, according to people who were there. Kevin McElroy was in attendance and told WBUR that while the crowd was waiting for the concert to finally start, you could see that Joplin was underneath the stage. He continued, "She had a bottle of Southern Comfort and she was just in a world of her own there. She just was doing what she wanted to do in the moment. After another hour and a half or so, it was really quite a delay. She literally burst onto the stage. It was just electric." Journalist Charles Giuliano was there as well and reviewed the concert for the Boston Herald-Traveler. Between his review and his memories, it is clear that Joplin was not looking great, visibly inebriated and unhealthy, and getting out of breath by the middle of songs. Still, she gave the performance her all, bantering with the audience and making up lyrics when she forgot the real ones. She never performed live again. During her final TV interview on The Dick Cavett Show, Joplin made a shocking announcement. Despite having a horrible time in high school where she was bullied for being different, Joplin announced that she would attend her 10-year reunion on August 14, 1970. She told Cavett, "They laughed me out of class, out of town, and out of the state, so I'm going home." This could have been a triumphant return considering she was a huge rock star by that point. But when reporters cornered her at the event, the reality of how painful it was for her became obvious. Her angry retorts to rude questions from journalists about why she had been bullied and not asked to prom were all caught on tape.
And I've been suffering ever since.
The only recognition she received from her class was the award for traveling the furthest to attend. Her younger sister Laura was still living in Port Arthur, Texas, and attended the reunion with Janis. Laura told Louder that while the footage looks awkward, overall the experience was a good thing. She said, "I think that Janis got what she needed from it. She resolved some of her questions of her place relative to high school people and whether or not she needed to be applauded. It wasn't the wonderful triumph she would have loved, some huge red carpet honor from her high school."
They still haven't figured me out.
Sometime in the summer of 1970, 21-year-old Seth Morgan delivered cocaine to Joplin's house. He was the son of a wealthy New York literary family, but had dropped out of UC Berkeley and gotten involved in the drug trade. Joplin toured over the summer, but when she returned to California in August, the pair started dating. Morgan moved into her home, and by September, they were engaged. Morgan's former lawyer told the Washington Post, "He fell in love with her because she was a star. Every time I saw them, they were wrapped up in each other, but they had mutual doubts about each other's fidelity." Morgan died in a motorcycle crash at age 41 in 1990, but shortly before his death, he spoke to the Los Angeles Times about his relationship with Joplin. Morgan admitted to the newspaper, "Everybody wanted to know what Janis saw in me." While they had only known each other for a matter of weeks, Morgan says that the rock star was serious about marrying him. He claimed that the final call Joplin made before she died was to City Hall asking about getting the marriage license for the couple. He said, "She wanted us to get married on a cruise ship." Those close to Joplin, including her sister Laura and one of her bandmates, think she was just looking for marriage and a possible retirement from the music industry as an escape. Morgan wasn't perfect, but he was there.
Her life was really about going for what she cared about.
In the weeks before she died, Joplin was working hard on her next album at the Sunset Sound recording studio in Los Angeles. There was a lot of pressure on her to deliver, since it was her second solo album and her first one had not performed as well commercially as the ones where she was a part of Big Brother and the Holding Company. She recorded songs including Move Over and Me and Bobby McGee. There was another song Joplin recorded during one of her final sessions that wasn't meant for the album, a birthday message for John Lennon. The former Beatle told the story a year later on the Dick Cavett Show, telling the host, "We didn't meet, but she sent me a birthday tape on my birthday for my last birthday. Yoko asked all different people to make a tape for me, and she was one of them, and we got it after she died. It arrived in the post, and she was singing Happy Birthday to me in the studio." The last song Joplin ever recorded was Mercedes-Benz. She did it in one take. It was October 1st, 1970, and her second-to-last session in the studio before her death 3 days later. The album she was working on would be posthumously released as the rock and roll classic Pearl. Joplin was committed to being at her best during the Pearl recording sessions, but this dedication may have inadvertently contributed to her death. The singer had been off heroin for several months at that point, ever since she returned from her trip to Brazil in the spring. Not using any substance at all was clearly not an option for her, so she had been drinking heavily over the summer. But she knew that drinking was bad for her voice, and hangovers would make her less on her A-game in the studio. She decided the best thing to do was to stop drinking and start using heroin again. The singer told herself that this was just a temporary solution and that she would give it up again when recording was over and she could return to booze. She would wait until the recording session was done for the day before using. Whether or not Joplin would have been able to get clean one more time is something the world will never know. Her tolerance for the drug was lower since she had not been using it for a while, and the drugs she was getting were much stronger and purer than what she had been using previously. All of these things would form a perfect storm that would end up killing the singer long before her time.
I didn't set out to be a singer. That came after I was already a singer.
Janis Joplin's last full day alive was October 3rd, 1970. If there was any feeling of impending doom, it wasn't obvious from the normal way she spent it. Most of her day was spent at the Sunset Sound recording studio. Her backing group, the Full Tilt Boogie Band, had finished the instrumental track for the song Buried Alive in the Blues. Joplin was planning to record her vocals for it the next day, so she listened to the instrumental in preparation. It was 11 p.m. by the time Joplin left the studio. She headed to Barney's Beanery in West Hollywood, where she had some drinks with a couple of her band members. Then she returned to her hotel alone. No one was waiting for her, which was unexpected. She had asked both her fiancé Seth Morgan and her friend Peggy Caserta to join her. Neither showed up. Morgan hadn't bothered to get on the flight down from San Francisco, where he was entertaining other women in Joplin's house that evening. Joplin injected heroin in her room. Because of the technique she preferred, the drug hit her system more slowly. While she waited, she went downstairs to get cigarettes. The last person she spoke to was a hotel's receptionist when she asked for change so she could use the cigarette machine. Then Joplin returned to her room and was never seen alive again. Joplin died in room 105 of the Landmark Hotel in Los Angeles sometime after midnight on October 4, 1970. The next day, the singer failed to show up at the studio to record as planned, so her producer called Janis's road manager John Cook to find out where she was. Seth Morgan was also trying to get a hold of his fiancée and called Cook when she didn't answer the phone. It was 18 hours after her death when Cook went to the Landmark Hotel. There, her body was discovered on the floor of her room. Cook would later describe it as looking like a crime scene because there was blood from where Janis had hit her head when she collapsed. The coroner ruled that the singer had died of an accidental heroin overdose. She was 27. Joplin's younger sister Laura would later reveal that while Janis always got her heroin from a drug dealer she trusted, the chemist he used to test each batch was unavailable that day. The heroin Janis took was 10 times more powerful than normal. Laura told Louder, "There's certainly a lesson in her life for me. It's important to be true to yourself, as she said many times, and at the same time, what she didn't quite get as clearly, to realize that you have to live with the consequences of your behavior, and she died from them."